Good afternoon or good evening, I guess, or good morning to some people who are online. For us, it's good afternoon or good evening. Winter time is starting, nice and dark. Casper was asking me if it's okay for me. I actually like the dark. Must be something very dark inside me, right? I like the dark. Okay, so we'll get started. We will start with some silence, some meditation to begin with. I just wanted to mention that I was looking at some research yesterday on meditation and the way it impacts us. And there is a lot of well, not a lot, but there is some research coming out showing that when people meditate, there has been a lot of evidence on how useful it is, how beneficial it is. But there has also been some evidence now that it can be harmful. It can lead to certain unexpected or unwanted outcomes and results. And then I was looking into when does that happen? When we go into stillness, we've talked about this before. When we go into silence, when we go into stillness, we don't know what is going to emerge in the mind. It's difficult to predict that all the time. We may all have certain memories, certain experiences that have not been resolved, that enter into our consciousness, and then we don't know what to do with them. And that's why throughout this series that we have of 8 talks, we have been talking about silence and going into silence, but also knowledge. Because we need to somehow understand what is going on inside us and also develop the skills to navigate that. So, because if you try to silence the mind without really resolving or without the proper knowledge framework to resolve issues that may emerge, then it could perhaps sometimes be something that may bring up unwanted, unexpected experiences. So that's why the knowledge, the balance between knowledge and silence becomes very, very important. And we've talked about different aspects of knowledge throughout this series. We've talked about faith, we've talked about desire, we've talked about morality, and today we will talk about grief. And especially grief, because in moments of silence, unresolved experiences of sadness and loss can emerge. And we probably need to have some tools, some frameworks to be able to navigate them. So today we will look at the experience of grief. But before that, we will have a little experience of silence. So once again, the 4 steps we've been talking about to get into meditation. Step 1, don't trouble the body, relax the body. Don't try and make the body stiff. Pay attention to where there is tension lingering in the body and try and let it go. Step 2, don't try and control the mind in terms of shutting down thoughts, pushing away thoughts. Let thoughts come and go. Let thoughts come and go. Don't try to hold on to any thought. Don't try to push it away. Step 3, instead of trying to control thoughts, try and slip beneath the thoughts and experience that silence of consciousness that we talk about. That room in which thought enters, that room in which emotions enter, that room in which sensations enter. Try and touch that experience of consciousness, silence. And step 4, depending on what your faith is or lack of faith is, if you believe in a higher power, you place yourself in the presence of that higher power. If you don't believe in any higher power like God out there, then you can place yourself in the consciousness and the awareness of your own highest self and connect with your highest self, your core values. So 4 steps. And we will practice these 4 steps right now. As usual, I will give you some thoughts and you can follow those thoughts. So first, let's relax ourselves. Meditation is also about grounding the self very clearly in our reality. But just learning to look at that reality, learning to approach that reality from a slightly different perspective. So let's relax and allow the muscles of the body to relax. Pay attention to any tension that may be sitting in the body. Relax the muscles of your legs. Relax your stomach, your chest, relax your shoulders, your arms, your hands and fingers. Relax the muscles of your neck. And notice how the body holds on to tension in the muscles of the face, and relax these. Relax the tiny muscles around the mouth, the eyes, the forehead. Feel a wave of relaxation flowing throughout your body, from the top of the head to the tip of the toes. Once again, pay attention to the shoulders, the neck, the muscles of the face, and relax them. And in this relaxed state, pay attention to what may be lingering in the mind. Perhaps thoughts of the past or the future. Perhaps sensations in the present. Whatever it may be, allow these thoughts and sensations to exist. But try and imagine that these thoughts, sensations are like particles of sand in a lake of water. The lake of the mind. And these particles of sand gently settle down into the bottom of the lake. Making the waters of the mind clear, clean, still. And you listen to the silence within. The silence of consciousness. The silence in which all thought, feeling, emotion enter. Keep your attention on this silence. And in this silence, you place yourself in the presence of the divine, in the way you understand the divine. It could be a higher power or your own highest self. And today you bring into your mind the value of love. And you ask yourself the question, what does love mean to me? Just ask the question and let it be. Let it go. If answers emerge, they emerge. If they don't, they don't. And once again, listen to the silence. Opening your mind to listening deeply. allowing the silence to speak to you. And holding on to this silence, you allow yourself to gently return to your immediate surroundings, allowing your eyes to gently blink open, looking out into your world. Look around you, make eye contact with one person, and smile. We've talked about this briefly before. When we enter deep silence, it allows the brain to also relax. And when the brain relaxes, we can make new connections. A lot of creativity emerges from silence. You allow the neurons to make new connections, and we have insight. Many discoveries we know were made in the middle of the night, right? Scientists have been working on a problem and then they go to sleep. In the middle of the night, they wake up and they have an answer. We've seen many cases like that. At least many scientists report that. Because when the brain relaxes, we can see things in a different way. Okay. Today, during the meditation, I thought about love. I hadn't planned it. It just came into my mind. Maybe because love has to do with grief. And today we will look at that. So relatedness is a big thing for human beings, isn't it? There are many theories that tell us that one of the core human needs, doesn't matter which place in the world you're from, one of the core human needs is to feel safely related, safe relatedness. And if you look at studies in psychology, we can see that when children feel a safe relatedness with their caregiver, whoever the caregiver is, they feel more confident because they know they have somebody has their back. They explore the world more. They discover their abilities, competencies. When children don't feel that safe relatedness with the caregiver, obviously they're trying to get that safety in the world and they feel that sense of insecurity. Then they don't have that confidence. They don't explore the world more. They don't discover their abilities. That safe relatedness with our world at a very basic level, I guess it's with the primary caregiver, the mother, the father, the primary caregiver, whoever it is. But as we grow up, it can also be that safe relatedness with our friends, with our teachers, the school that we go to, in our neighborhood, in our countries, in our societies, in the world, right? We humans, we need that safe relatedness. It's very important for us. And that's why when we lose that relatedness, it can be very, very painful. And today we will talk about that grief, because grief is the anguish, the deep pain of loss, losing something or someone with whom we have some sort of an affectionate bonding. There is an affectionate bonding, there is a bonding of love. And it can be problematic in many ways. We will talk about that today. But let us begin here, right? We will talk about grief. And For our purposes, we will define it as the anguish, pain, whatever you would like to, whichever word you would like to use here, but the anguish of loss. We lose something or someone with whom there is some sort of an affectionate bonding. And we lose this affectionate bonding. And affection it has to do with love, right? We talk about love a lot, but we will talk about that today in this particular way. Love has to do with this affectionate bonding. It can be someone. Today we will focus on relationships, but the loss could be of many different kinds. The loss could also be, say, for example, one is, we lose somebody because of death. I lost my father, 2006, I remember. I loved him a lot. I think he loved me also a lot. I lost him. So we lose sometimes people to death. And normally when we talk about grief, that is what we focus on, mourning the loss of somebody through death. But the loss can be quite complicated. It can be due to death, but it can also be if somebody falls ill, for example. Say if somebody develops dementia. The person is physically present, but psychologically the person is absent. I've met a friend of mine 2 days ago. Her father has developed dementia. He lives in Australia. She lives here. She went to see him all the way. He cannot recognize her. She went up and she asked him, "Dad, do you know who I am?" He looks at her and then he says, "Are you my wife?" He doesn't recognize her. So the person is physically present, but the relationship is lost. All that affectionate bonding that was there with that person in that relationship, that is lost. And especially for people who are living with that kind of illness, it can be very difficult because the person is physically there, but not really there. That can also be a terrible loss, and it is painful for many people to experience something like that. But the loss can also be a change in a relationship. It could be a breakup. Breakups can be very, very painful. Romantic relationship. It can also be a breakup with a parent, right? It could be a breakup with a sibling with whom we have, I don't know, developed some conflict. It could be that. It could be divorce, separation. It could be for some people, children moving out of the home, becoming empty nesters. It can be a very painful experience for some people. And some people struggle with it for years, years. Children have moved out of the house and suddenly they feel this very profound emptiness. It can be a sibling moving out of the house. My elder brother, my elder sister, they've grown up and they moved out. And I have no one else who can be there at home to take care of me in that way that I'm used to. That can be very, very, very traumatic sometimes also, but very painful for the person who has lost a sibling. The sibling is there, but not there at home anymore, right? And many times parents don't understand that the child is grieving. The child is grieving the physical loss of the sibling living in the house. It's difficult sometimes to understand that. Sometimes we don't understand because we are caught up in our own grief. Sometimes we feel, oh, it's not a big deal. Sibling is there, but not there. So the loss can be quite complicated. It can just be because of a change. But the loss could be of things. The loss could be, I grew up with one of my friends. He was, born to parents who were officers in the army. And being in the army, they were always moving around. And he would always have to move with them. And every time they would relocate, he loses his friends. Then he has to make new friends and then make new friends again. And the parents say, but you can always make new friends. But it's difficult, right? It can be difficult. So it can be something like that. It could be the loss of a home because of a natural disaster, terror attack. There could be so many reasons for the loss. The loss could be of things that we attach value to, with which we have an affectionate bonding. It could be an object that is very, very dear to us that is lost because the object represents something very, very deep to us. So loss can be quite complicated. Loss can have to do with many, many things. We will not be able to obviously go into all aspects of loss today. We will focus on relationships. We will look at the loss that can be through death, but it can also be the person is still alive, but we still lose something in that relationship. And that can be very painful. And many a times we don't even know that we are grieving. Some signs of grieving are very obvious. For example, you feel the sense of sadness and loneliness, right? So we feel that. So these could be, the grief is turned in some ways inward, and there can be very obvious signs like I feel sad, I feel lonely. That could be, I may cry. Sometimes I just start crying. Anyone, I don't know, I've had those experiences. Sometimes we just start crying for no reason, quote unquote, no reason. There is always a reason, but we don't know what the reason is. We suddenly start crying. Where is that suffering coming from? We are probably holding on to some grief, and which has not been resolved in some way. So it can be sadness and it can show itself in many, many different ways, but it can also be other experiences. For example, there can sometimes be the experience of guilt, remorse, because of a loss, and we will go into that. And that can be a bit difficult to navigate sometimes, that experience of guilt and remorse associated with a loss of someone that we value a lot. There can also be this experience of numbness, where we feel nothing. We feel absolutely nothing. Things are just blocked. And sometimes we withdraw from the world. There is a withdrawal from the world, social interactions, for example. We don't feel like interacting with people. Sometimes we don't feel like interacting with people. It can also be quite positive. It can be from a desire to get to know the self and go deeper into stillness, for example. That can also be the case. But sometimes the withdrawal is an avoidance of the world, because confronting the world, meeting the world can be quite painful. So there are various ways. There are many other ways, of course. We don't have the space on this little boat, so we'll have to stop there. But the grief can also be turned outwards. And of course, one of the ways in which the grief can turn outwards is anger. And the anger can, it doesn't have to be full-blown anger. It can also be irritation. Just getting annoyed with people. And sometimes, of course, it can be full flow of, complete anger as such. And it can also lead to some sort of aggressive behavior in some people, because we don't know how to deal with that. So anyway, guilt can manifest itself in many different ways. We will talk about, maybe one more way is this self-neglect. We don't feel like cleaning the house. We don't feel like cooking. We don't feel like having nutritious food. We just feel like sitting and having a lot of cola or alcohol or cigarettes. And we know we are not taking care of ourselves, but we do it anyway because we just don't care. We don't care. We don't care about ourselves, and we can't be bothered. So we just neglect the self. There can be, difficulty even keeping our place clean, and we just don't care. And so grief can manifest itself in many different ways, and sometimes it's useful for us to look out the way I am behaving. Is it because of an experience that I am trying to avoid, something that I have not resolved? Well, it can manifest in different ways. But we will talk about a few things, right? So I've tried to look at my own life. So, this whole series really is me trying to make sense of my own life, basically. And you're all the guinea pigs. That's how it is. So you have to live with that. But so I was thinking there are three things I thought about when thinking about grief. One is we grieve for the life we had. We don't have it anymore. It could be the relationship I've had with my father or mother, and I don't have them anymore in my life, but it could also be because of a change in that relationship. Maybe I had a relationship, I had a girlfriend, and I don't have her anymore in my life. It could also be a job I had that I don't have anymore in my life. It could be many other things, but we will focus on relationships. And the other aspect of grief, or another way in which grief can be experienced, is this life we never had. The life that we wished we had, but the life that we never had. And that can be a bit complicated. So, for example, it could be I wish my mother would love me the way I wanted her to love me, but she never did. I wish my friends in school had understood me, but they did not. I wish my colleagues at work had shown a little more respect when I was experiencing whatever it is I was experiencing, but they did not. And these wounds can stay inside us sometimes. And we then grieve for the life that we never had. But we wish we had that life. We never had it. In old age, sometimes we can also grieve for the children we never had. Or in middle age, sometimes when we realize we cannot have children anymore, we grieve for the children we never had. I've seen experiences of people breaking up because they want children, but they haven't had children, so they want to break up, even though the relationship is very good. They want to break up because they want to go and maybe start a new relationship with somebody else with whom they can have a child. So this happens, and sometimes it can be quite destructive if we don't know how to, work with it and resolve it. And sometimes we grieve for the life we will not have in the future. So there are these various aspects to grief. Grief has to do with the past, grief has to do with the present, but grief can also have to do with the future. And I will share some examples from my own experiences to see where it takes us. Obviously, the examples may not be relevant to everybody, but they might be relevant to some. Two examples stand out around this, the life that we had. And by the way, when I say the life that we had, it doesn't necessarily refer to the entire life that we had. It could be a moment that we had that is lost. Like, for example, I remember I was very, very young. I think I was around 6 or 7. I don't remember very clearly, but around 6 or 7. I was studying in a different city, not where my parents lived. So my parents had sent me to a boarding school, kost school, as we say in Denmark, right? Because they thought I will have a very nice education there, which I did in some ways. So it was all right. So I was living in this other town, far away, where I was in the hostel. And I remember my father had come to visit me. He spent a couple of days with me. And my father, he was a teddy bear. He was very, very sweet, very, very nice person. Um, and he loved me a lot. So I spent these days with him, and it was very, very nice. And then he had to leave. Obviously, he had his own business and all, so he left. And then I remember I came back and I was crying and I was crying and I was crying and I was crying and I was imagining all sorts of things. I was imagining, oh my God, now what happens if my father left by train? What happens? The train is going to cross a bridge. What happens if the bridge breaks? What happens if there is flooding? This fear of losing him. And I would say that to people around me. They wouldn't understand. They would laugh. They would say, come on, don't be silly. No, for me, it wasn't being silly. It was pain. It was very, very deep, right? So for a child, it can be very, very deep. And people around may not understand. They will say, come on, dad is going to come back tomorrow, or dad will come back next week, or dad will come back, and he will call you. But for the child, it's very painful. And the child needs to have the, I don't know, the permission to grieve and the understanding that, yes, what you feel is true. And then see how you can console the child. But I remember that experience. It was so painful, so painful. And I felt so alone because no one understood me. I felt so alone. That was one experience. So it's not like, I had lost my father then. Rationally, even as a child, I knew he was there and he would come back. But then my experience was still that. It was very, very strong. So that's one thing. The second experience I remember is my first breakup. It wasn't really even a breakup, very complicated life story. So my first girlfriend, eh, we didn't even want to separate, but it's a long story, so I will not get into that today. Maybe next session, which is on romantic love, it's a better story for that. But I'll just share the experience. So neither of us really wanted to be separated, but things happened that sort of separated us. And I remember that was so painful, so painful, so painful. I remember once I went to this park, this garden we used to hang around. I was an adult. I was like 21 at the time, right? So I was an adult. And I remember I went to that park where we used to hang out and spend time, have picnics and all. And I threw myself on the ground and I was beating my fists on the ground and sort of, why did this have to happen? Very, very painful. Very, very painful. There's a life that we had, but we don't have anymore. How do we deal with that? And that is what we will try and talk about today, right? How do you deal with such experiences? The life that we had that we don't have anymore. And if we don't resolve that grief and that pain, it can manifest in different ways, right? Then, of course, I can develop separation anxiety every time my father is going away. I don't want to leave my father because I'm afraid he will never come back. It can happen. In my case, fortunately, it did not happen for whatever reasons. But in some other cases, it can happen. You develop that anxiety and then you carry on that anxiety for the rest of your life. Then we enter into romantic relationships that we will talk about. We also have that separation anxiety there. And then sometimes we sabotage the relationship because of the separation anxiety. Because I'm afraid of losing the person, then I end up doing something to lose the person as long as I'm in control. All these complicated patterns can emerge if these experiences are not resolved and worked through. So that's the life we had, but we have lost. The second is around the life we never had. I was thinking, can I think of experiences from my own life? And honestly, I could not come across. The only thing I can think of was, so why I thought about that was because of an experience I had with another person, and I will share that with you. But then I was thinking in my own life, have I ever grieved for the life I've never had? And honestly, I think a couple of times I have felt that grief, that sorrow, not very big, but I have felt it of not having a child. I don't have a child, right? And who knows, I may never have a child. And now I'm 50, so maybe I should not be having a child. I don't know. So, but still, that thought, and there is you see a child, and then you feel, well, maybe I could have been a good father, and you miss that, you miss that. So that is also a kind of a loss. That life that we never had. But I remember once I was in Greece and I was doing some workshops and all that. And then I was talking to a lady who was present in one of these workshops after the workshop. And we had a very deep conversation. She was saying, her husband had passed away a few months ago. And she said, my husband passed away and I'm okay. I'm okay with it. He lived a good life and I think we had a good life. So I'm all right. But every time somebody walks up to me and tells me something like, oh, what a wonderful man your husband was, I start crying. And I can't even control that. It's very, very strong. And I feel the suffering and I don't know where it's coming from. Because otherwise I'm quite at peace. I know, yeah, I've lost him, but it's okay. I have a family, I have a loving family. But and it's only when somebody comes and tells me that your husband was such a nice man. It's only then that I start crying. And I don't know why. And we had a very deep conversation around that for around an hour. And what came out was this. She eventually realized that she had never told her husband, at least she doesn't remember telling her husband, what a wonderful man he was. And it was that guilt, that remorse, that he was such a wonderful man. I never said that to him. And of course, she had shown love to him in many other ways, but she never said that. And when people would say that to her, she was reminded of that I never said, and that remorse, that guilt would make her respond in that particular way. So it can be different ways, right? The life that we never had, we can grieve over that also. And sometimes the life that we will never have in the future, the life that we never had in the past, but the life that we will never have or we will not have in the future. And that can be various ways it can manifest itself. Say, for example, a woman wants to have a child, but it's too late for her to have a child. To reach menopause, it's too late for her to have a child. The same thing with a man. Maybe it's too late to have a child, and therefore in the future, you will never have that. And maybe you wanted it, but now you will never have that. It could also be other things. It could be the loss of an ability. It could be the loss of a limb of the body, for example. Right? Say an athlete loses a limb, legs, for example. And there are certain things you will never be able to do anymore. It could be a psychological ability, like people, for example, when they begin to realize that they are developing dementia or they're losing certain cognitive abilities, which were very, very important for them for their identity. That is, and that I cannot have that. I cannot do these things anymore in the future. So it is also that life that we will not have. And sometimes for people who are dealing with, a situation where you have close loved ones who maybe have terminal illness. I'm going through a situation like that right now. My mother has been diagnosed with cancer. And the likelihood is that she will, die at some point. And the life that I have right now with her, when I go and I meet her and I can give her a hug, I can give her a kiss. And she's so happy to see me. Whenever I go, she lives in India with my brother. Whenever I go, she's so happy. And she keeps saying this every day. She says the same thing every day, almost, I think. She says, I have two eyes, I have two arms, I have two legs, I have two sons. And she's so happy. I will never get to hear that. And that thought is painful, right? At some point, I will not be able to hear that from her. I will not be able to give her that happiness. And so what I noticed, very interesting, what I noticed was because of that pain, I started avoiding talking to her on the phone. Right? Because it's painful, I started avoiding talking to her on the phone. And then I sat down and I asked, Salman, what are you doing? Why are you avoiding? Every time I would call my brother and I would say, you want to talk to mom? Yeah, I'll talk to her next time. I would call him up, I talk to him almost every week and then call him up, yeah, I'll talk. Why are you doing this? Because I'm afraid of facing that eventuality. The avoidance. I haven't written it there, but sometimes I just write that down here, for example, right? We want to avoid the person. The avoidance can come from different places within us, but for example, in this case, the avoidance is coming from the unwillingness, the inability perhaps of confronting the reality of that loss, which will probably happen very soon, sometime in the near future. So the life that we will not have in the future. And then I was thinking, a lot of this has to do with love. Because it is the love that we had that we have lost. It is the love that we never had, that we never received, or in the way that we wanted to receive it. And sometimes, in the cases of trauma, it can be very complicated. Children who have been traumatized by their own parents for whatever reason, willingly or unwillingly, or by the caregiver. And we expect, as a child, we expect the elders around us to take care of us. We expect them to protect us, to love us. And as children, we are helpless. We cannot take care of ourselves. And we expect those around us to take care of us. And if they do not, that is a terrible betrayal. Sometimes it can be unintentional. A parent is busy with something and does not hear the child crying. Sometimes it can be unintentional. But for the child, it's still a very big deal because the child doesn't know what the parent was doing. The child doesn't know the parent was busy. The child only experiences that feeling of helplessness. And it can be traumatic. So it can be unintentional. But sometimes, people have their own traumas and they pass on their traumas to the people around them. Hurt people, as we keep saying. Hurt people. The traumatized become the traumatizer. If I have been traumatized in the past, it is possible that I will end up traumatizing others around me. And if I have a child and I have been traumatized in the past, it is possible unless that, therefore, it's so important. It is so important for us to stop that chain somewhere. Even if there has been trauma in the family, we have to stop it. I have to stop it. If I don't, then it passes on. It will pass on to my children if I have children, or it will pass on to whoever it is I'm encountering in the world, to my spouse. I have to resolve it. And sometimes caregivers end up traumatizing children for whom they're responsible. And as a child, I wanted your love. I wanted you to protect me. I wanted you to take care of me. And you haven't done that. And that can be very, very painful. It's a betrayal of love because a child just blindly trusts the caregiver to give them that love. And they don't get it. And then they are abused. That can be very, very. So when loss is associated with trauma, it can be extremely painful to deal with it. Extremely painful to deal with it. And very, very difficult to deal with it. And yet we have to deal with it because if we don't, then the risk is A, I suffer, and B, I can pass on that suffering to others. So it becomes, in some way, we talked about morality in the previous session. In some ways, it becomes my moral responsibility to see what I can do with it. This can all get a little heavy, right? But we are also trying to look at what can be done about it, because, and we will come to that. Any thoughts, questions emerging in your mind right now? Or we move on? Yeah, we'll move on. So this love that we have, there is a saying when I put up the, post on LinkedIn, one lady who works with hospice, she saw the post. She also connected with me and she made a comment on the post, which also stimulated many thoughts in me. And her comment was this, that, it's grief is love that we have lost and also love that we have perhaps not received. And then I was going deeper into that line of thinking. Sometimes it is also the love that we have, but we don't know how to give it. And we don't know who to give it to. So the love is expressed in my experience in two ways. There is a deep yearning inside us as human beings. And this yearning is both to give and to receive. So it is not just to receive, but it is also to give. Love is an experience that we all have. And sometimes the love that we have experienced, for example, in a romantic relationship, the love that we have experienced, we have lost that experience of love, but it is both the love that we received from that person, but also because we believe we have no one to give it to, or we don't know how to give it. And especially if the love is associated with trauma, we don't know how to give that love. We don't know how, because every time we give that love, we are afraid. We are afraid of losing it again, or we are afraid that that love will be betrayed in some way or taken advantage of in some way. So we are afraid sometimes of giving. And that creates frustration because it is our natural nature, really, to give love, but it gets frustrated. This yearning, it gets frustrated. And that frustration can lead to so many other, all these symptoms that we've talked about. We are unable to give and we are unable to receive. We're unable to give perhaps because of fear, uh, difficulty in, dealing with whatever pain we have inside us. We don't want to give because we are afraid of feeling that pain again. And we are unable to receive. And sometimes when we are unable to receive, because we are afraid of losing people's love, and people give us love, we can't accept it. We reject. We reject the person who is trying to show us love. I had an experience once, I should share that with you. This inner vulnerability, it can be so difficult to navigate sometimes. I was with a friend. We were traveling, and I had an experience of what I can probably best describe as some sort of racist behavior at the airport against me. And in that moment, I was quite shocked by that behavior. And I was quite upset. So in that moment, I didn't know how to respond. And my friend who was next to me, he says, he knew what happened. So he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, Salman, are you okay? I immediately pushed away his hand. And that was anger. I know exactly, it was anger. I just pushed away his hand. And then as I did that, I realized what I had done. And then I said, I'm sorry, give me some time. And then then of course we talked about it. But then I was thinking what was going on. He was showing me love. But I don't know what inside me was triggered. That space of vulnerability where someone is showing you love and you feel that love that is being shown is not genuine, it's not honest, or you will lose it. I don't know what experience that came from. I don't know that. That memory is probably lost. Maybe I had some experience in my childhood, which, was something like that, but that memory is lost, but the feeling remains. Later on, when I sat down and I meditated on it, I know exactly that it was that fear of opening up to receiving somebody's love and then being betrayed by that. You will not have that love anymore in the future. So today, the child of the mind of the child. Oh, today you're showing me love, but tomorrow you will not be there for me. That it was exactly that. But today you're showing me love, tomorrow you will not be there for me. And then get out. I don't want your love. I don't even know where it came from. But I know that was the feeling. So we frustrate ourselves. We frustrate ourselves because we are unable to receive the love because of the baggage we are carrying, and we are unable to give the love as well. Okay, so We should also look at solutions, right? How do we work with this? One thing I have seen in relate, and this can be quite complicated, right? But in relationships, especially in close relationships, say romantic relationships, especially, or relationships between a parent and a sibling, or a caregiver and a child, parent and a child, or a caregiver and a child. Doesn't have to be the parent. Sometimes what happens is because of this affectionate bonding, the construction of self that is happening is something like this, right? So we have the I, and we have the you, but the experience of we becomes dominant. My identity is defined by this affectionate bonding between I and you. The we becomes very dominant, especially for a child. That we is also very important because the child needs to experience that safe we. The problem, of course, is sometimes this we that is formed is not safe because of the experiences the child may have had. This we that is formed is not safe. So the strong we is there, the affectionate bonding is there with the you, but that affection is also accompanied by pain. And that can become very problematic. So in some cases, it's largely positive, the we, but in some cases, that we can be quite negatively constructed because of negative experiences people have had with the caregiver in that relationship. Now, this has to be healed in some ways, and there are various ways of doing it. One possibility is that we change the configuration so that this I and the you is separated, but at the same time, the you can't even see that. That's supposed to be the we inside that little bubble. But the we is integrated within the self. Now that is quite difficult. We will talk about that a little bit right now. But sometimes when the we is quite painful, then we have to go into this kind of a configuration because the we is just not there, right? So the I and the you have to be separated, and then through this process, you have to somehow move towards integrating um, uh, the we in a way that is healthy. How do we do that? So one way that many people talk about is, the separation of the child from the parent, this identity. At some point, usually during the preteen, late childhood, preteen, teenage years, there is the separation of the self from the caregiver, and the child is forming their own identity. So there is a separation. At the same time, whatever it is I have learned from the other, the healthy way of doing that would be I begin to integrate that within myself. It becomes a part of me, but I begin to own it. Now, that sounds like a lot of words, right? Doesn't it? Yeah, it is. It does sound good because it's complicated. So let me try and explain it. Let's forget about this. Let's start somewhere else. So I think the first thing that in my own life, that has helped me a lot is the feeling of compassion. What does this mean? And when I'm talking about compassion, we are talking about self-compassion here because it is a pain that we are carrying inside us. And the experience of self-compassion can be quite healing. What does that really mean? Compassion comes from the Greek word for suffering. It is suffering with the other. You say passion. Passion is actually the Greek word for suffering. But passion comes from the Greek word for suffering. We use passion in a very different way today in our language. You're passionate about something, right? But passion comes from the Greek word for suffering. And even in English earlier, when people would talk about the passions, they would talk about these strong emotions that we were unable to control. Compassion is you are feeling that emotion, you're allowing yourself to suffer with the other. If somebody is experiencing pain, I feel compassion. I understand that pain. And in some ways, I even suffer with you. So compassion is suffering. Self-compassion is an experience where I allow the suffering to happen, because many a times what is happening is we're trying to push away the suffering. That doesn't solve the problem, because the suffering has to be resolved, it has to be healed. Self-compassion is an experience where we allow the suffering to happen, but simultaneously, we emerge the experience of love, kindness for the self. And in our mind, it's an ability which can be developed. In the mind, we hold the pain, the suffering, and the love simultaneously at the same time. So we allow that painful experience to exist in the mind, and we emerge the experience of love, kindness in the mind. And we hold both the experiences simultaneously. It can appear to be difficult, but it can be done. I speak from my own experience at least. And over time, what happens is this experience of love and kindness begins to heal this experience of pain and suffering. And it begins to get transformed. It takes a little time, but it can be done. I speak from experience, money back guaranteed. It can be done. The thing is, we believe it is so difficult. We believe looking at that pain is so difficult. But looking at that pain and feeling and allowing yourself to feel the pain is extremely important in healing. You know, for trauma, we will not talk about trauma today, but trauma therapies. We know, for example, exposure therapy works very, very well with the healing of trauma. And in exposure therapy, what we are doing is we are making the person revisit the experience of trauma in a safe environment. That safety is very, very important. So this feeling of compassion, feeling of self-compassion that we talked about needs to happen in some sort of an experience of security, safety. Otherwise, it is very, very difficult. So in exposure therapy, of course, it is with a psychotherapist, psychologist, and then, of course, you know, it is done in a way that the person feels safe, and then you revisit the trauma, you work through the trauma, you allow yourself to feel what you had felt, but in a safe environment that allows for that experience to slowly be transformed. But so this allowing the self to feel. One of my favorite sayings is, if you can't feel it, you can't heal it. If we push away the pain, we also, especially in grief, because grief is associated with love. If we push away the pain, we also push away the love that is embedded in the pain. If we push away the pain, we also push away the love that is embedded in the pain, that is a part of that pain, that love that was betrayed, that love that we lost, that love that we never had, that we should have had, that love that we might never have in the future. That love is a part of that pain. If we push away the pain, we push away the love. If we push away the love, we cannot heal. So the trick is allowing yourself to feel the pain, but along with the pain, you feel the love. And when we do that, we can begin to heal. In my own experience, it may not apply to everybody. In my own experience, no matter what I have experienced, anything negative, my place of security is going deep into the experience of silence and placing myself in the presence of God, because I believe in a higher power. For those of us who do not believe in a higher power, I think it can still be done. I mean, people heal. Even atheists heal, by the way. They don't have to believe in God to heal, right? But there is self-compassion can be practiced. You don't have to have a faith in God to practice self-compassion. It is just the ability to hold the love and the pain simultaneously in the mind. So we do that. Then, so the feeling becomes very, very important. But then feeling in this particular way, where you immerse the pain and the love simultaneously. But along with the feeling, there also has to be meaning making. Finding a meaning behind the suffering. You know, we've talked about love, and earlier in our sessions, we've talked about essence and form. So love is an essence. Essence is what we all yearn to experience. It is a very core thing. We all want to experience that. But the essence can take different forms. So for some people, love is about being kind and affectionate and protecting the other and being nice to people and things like that, helping people. For some people, love is actually about being strict. Because if they're not strict, then the child will get spoiled. So I have to be strict and I have to be disciplined. My mother was like that, by the way. And for some time, really, as a child, I used to feel she doesn't love me. Why? Because she was quite strict. And then I remember in my teenage years, she told me something which completely changed my opinion about her, by the way. And good it happened. And my mom, she told me, when you were very small, you were very difficult to manage, and I was awful. I was like all over the place. I would break things, open things, throw things, anyway. So I must have given my mom some difficult times. And then she said, "I don't want to spoil you. You know what I used to do?" I said, "What?" She said, "I would always, when you would be asleep, I would come and I would kiss you. And when you were awake, I didn't want to do it because I thought that would spoil you." Oh, that changed everything for me. That changed everything for me. And I always remember, I always used to have this love for mom. And then I would think, come on, she doesn't love me. Because even if I was asleep, I must have felt it. I must have felt it. I must have felt her holding me. I must have felt her kissing me. I must have felt that. So sometimes love, and many a times we feel this person doesn't love me, but maybe it is because they are showing love in a form that I cannot recognize. Because I am used to showing love, or I want love in another form, right? But the person is maybe showing me love in another form so the form can be different. And one way of meaning making is also try to understand sometimes, especially with parents, right? Because we were with children, we don't have those cognitive abilities to figure out how, why parents were doing what they were doing. But sometimes it's just the question of them showing their love in a different form that I did not recognize as love at that time. At that time, I thought they didn't like me. That's why they were doing me, right? That's why they were doing whatever they did. If my mother is forcing me to brush my teeth, she doesn't understand me and she probably doesn't love me, right? As a child, you may feel like that. I just want to go and sleep and I want to have chocolate and you're not letting me have that. That means you don't love me. End of story. I've made up my mind. And parents can't always explain that to children, right? But as grown-ups, when we develop our ability to think in an abstract way, we can try and make sense of that. So there are various ways of meaning making. One is trying to see the essence behind the form that we've experienced. Another way of meaning making is whatever happened to us, even sometimes maybe somebody did something that was just with bad intentions. So there is no value we can see in that. But many people have transformed their trauma like that. For example, if something has happened, maybe one way of making meaning is that, well, what can I do to make sure that such a thing never happens again to the people that I love? Or what can I do to make sure that I help people who are in vulnerable situations like that so that they don't experience what I've experienced? Transforming that pain into something that is life-giving and purposeful. You may know Oprah Winfrey, right? Oprah Winfrey started her entire talk show from her own experiences of being abused, sexually abused. And she felt, I've gone through this and I want to help all other women who might have gone through this or who are at risk of going through this. That was her mission. She, of course, created a very successful business out of it, but she's also helped so many people. So many people. I haven't watched Oprah Winfrey so much, but I remember watching one show in which, so many women were on the show who had been helped, who stopped committing suicide, because in the previous show, Oprah had a few women who were close to committing suicide and did not commit suicide. So she was interviewing them and asking them, what stopped you from taking that step? On that day, some women saw that show. They had made up their minds to kill themselves that day. And because they saw that show, they stopped. So on this show, these women were called and they were talking. Fascinating. We can sometimes use that pain as energy to do something beautiful for the world. That is one way of meaning making. There are other ways of meaning making. And one way of dealing with grief is, and I've practiced this a lot with my mom, because I feel, I know like I'll probably lose her at some point in the near future. And then I ask myself, what's my mom all about? Right? What's my mom all about? What is this me that I've experienced with her? What is that all about? And to me, it's about responsibility and sacrifice. She sacrificed so much for us, for me, my brother and I. And she's probably one of the most responsible people I've ever met in my life. She would say something, she would do it. That's it. You can just depend on that. If she would say, I will be there at 7:30, she would be there at 7:30, not 7:20, 31. She would be there. So responsible and so much sacrifice. And then what I've been working on is, how do I bring these values into my life? Because then I'm honoring her. And tomorrow, when she will not be there, I'm honoring her memory. Then she will continue to live through me. Through those values, through those qualities, she will continue to live through me. And so, when I'm talking about meaning making, it is a lot about integrating, transforming this nature of the we in different ways. So here, that we, I'm taking it, I'm making it a part of me. For example, in the case of my mom, that sacrifice, that responsibility, I bring it into me. I practice it deliberately. I bring it into my mind every day. Okay, what does responsibility look like for me today? What does it mean to me today? Today, before this talk, I was sharing with Casper, something happened in my family. Somebody has developed a very serious mental illness. I have to be there. I have to be there. Doesn't matter if I have to give a talk or it doesn't matter. I have to be there. I have to pick up the phone and I have to talk. The world can wait. It's a simple translation of a value that comes from my mom, but I practice it. And every time I do it, I say, I'm doing this for you, mom. I'm doing this for you. It's to honor you. And tomorrow it's to honor your memory. And so then the pain becomes something that is life-giving for us and for others. And this becomes a part of me. And this is the process of integration. In cases where that we has been very, very painful, I have to separate the I and the you because the we was not really there in a safe way. I have to work on this process, but ultimately I have to work with integrating that experience. Even if it was very, very painful, I have to integrate that by finding meaning in that experience. It becomes in some ways my moral responsibility towards myself. I will conclude with giving an example of Viktor Frankl. I don't know how many of you know about Viktor Frankl. He was a psychiatrist, psychologist who was Jewish, and he spent time in Auschwitz. And through his experience of the concentration camp, he developed his entire system of psychotherapy. It's called logotherapy. And it's focused on making meaning of life out of life experiences. Because Viktor Frankl, when he was at Auschwitz, what he observed was some people, they would develop very simple infections and they would die. And some people would develop very serious diseases, but somehow they would not die. And the life in the concentration camps was not very easy, right? You didn't have good food, you didn't have good hygiene, you didn't have water, terrible conditions that they were living in. And somehow they would still survive. And Viktor Frankl, at being a psychiatrist, he started talking to these people. And he discovered the people who managed to survive, they had found a way of making meaning out of their suffering. For some, it was, I have to survive for my children. Even though they didn't know whether the children were alive, I have to survive. I have to survive for my wife. I have to survive for my parents. And for some, it was just this. If I die, evil wins. I cannot let evil win. I will live to show that you can take everything away from me. You cannot take away my life. I will live to show you that. That purpose, that sense of meaning can develop very strong resilience for people. So sometimes we may have had very difficult experiences in our life, traumatic experiences even, and they may seem impossible for us to overcome. But with some patience and with some understanding and with some practice, they can be overcome. So when we talk about acceptance of grief, acceptance requires many things. Acceptance requires that we feel it. Acceptance requires that we make meaning from it. Acceptance requires that we integrate that into our sense of self. And when we have done all that, then we can experience this acceptance of what has happened. So this acceptance needs me to feel, it needs me to make meaning, it needs me to actually integrate. And over time, I will develop that acceptance of what has happened.
Sometimes I think grief is the problem with grief, at least for me, is that I feel like I am victimizing myself, like become a victim of the circumstances, the loss, whatever it has been. And that's why I think I push away the grief because I don't want to be the victim. And then it stops there. Because I don't like the idea of being the person who is whining all the time. Oh, something happened to me, somebody did something to me, it was unfair, whatever it was. And especially when it becomes more or less a badge of honor these days that you have to live on your trauma for the rest of your life and don't be able to continue life. It's accepted that you can be half a person, half a being, because you have these traumas and I don't want to feel sorry for myself, and that's I know it's the wrong way of dealing with grief, but that's about it, I think.
So Lela, just to make it clear, because you said something very powerful, thank you for sharing that. Lela was just saying that sometimes I don't allow myself to feel the grief because I feel I'm victimizing myself and I don't want to be the victim. And you also said something about now it's sort of okay in the world to be half a person, that you continue to live with, whatever problems in some ways. And that can be seen as being a victim and continuing to live as a victim. And we don't want to sometimes have that experience. What I would probably say to that experience, first of all, that's a very, very valid experience because also practically speaking, we have many things to do. We have children to take care of. We have our work and we can't just sit and allow ourselves to feel whatever it is that we are feeling. It doesn't also help us practically in life sometimes. But the way I would look at it is this. By avoiding that experience, we are actually not being our whole self. We are being half a person. Because that experience of pain, however painful it is a part of who I am. The challenge is in transforming it. That's the challenge. So, of course, if we are unable, and by integrating, I am basically referring to the process of transformation. So, transformation to me is both meaning making and integrating. Making meaning of what has happened and integrating it into my life. So that pain is love. That pain that is love begins to transform into something that is life-giving. That pain can be a very powerful source of creating a life that is radically different for us, that we may not even be able to imagine today. But the energy of that pain, if we can couple it with the energy of love, can be very powerful. And it can transform our life into something that we today cannot even imagine, perhaps. But that task of integrating, meaning making, that task, I think, is probably our task. So there I am not the victim. The patients that Viktor Frankl talked to, they were not victimizing themselves. They found a way out of their suffering through the process of meaning making and through the process of integrating it into their lives. Viktor Frankl himself transformed that experience into something that emerged a new form of therapy that has helped millions of people in the world, which is around that experience. So if we allow that transformation to happen, but that is something we have to work with. That is something we have to work with. And I think these three steps are very important. Feeling, allowing that feeling to happen. But the thing is, again, along with that feeling, you allow the love to emerge. Just the feeling of pain, not a good idea. Then stop meditating. Then just stop it. No need. If you can't feel the love, just stop doing it. And then, of course, the meaning making and then the integrating it, bringing it into your daily life. That becomes a very, very important part. The more we do that, the more we feel the power from it. And over time, we accumulate that power. And then we can finally accept what has happened. So I know today has been, I think, a slightly heavier topic, but it is heavy. It is heavy, but it can be worked with. In the next session, we will look at romantic love. And we will look at this dynamic in romantic love, where the we takes over completely, where the I is completely subsumed in the we, and the you is also completely subsumed in that we. What is that experience like? We will talk about that. But right now, let us have a little silence. Okay, so let's relax. Again, remember the 4 steps. Allow the body to relax, pay attention to where the tension of the mind is sitting in the body, and let it go. And one simple strategy. Sometimes in meditation, people find themselves dissociating, losing touch with their present reality. That's something we should try to avoid. So if that is happening, open your eyes. Simple strategy, open your eyes. You can meditate with eyes open. It's not a problem. I have learned to meditate with eyes open. I sometimes close them, sometimes I open them. You can meditate with your eyes open. But if you ever feel any kind of dissociation happening, immediately open your eyes, bring yourself into the reality, focus on a spot on the floor or somewhere, and keep yourself grounded. That is very, very important. So let's relax, paying attention to where tension is sitting in the muscles of the body, and learning to let go of this tension. Pay attention to the tension sitting in your shoulders, in your neck, and the muscles of your face. And let go of this tension. Feeling a wave of relaxation flowing throughout your body. From the top of the head to the tip of the toes. And allow the mind to settle down. You can imagine all the thoughts, feelings, sensations in your mind to be like particles of sand, gently settling down into the bottom of the lake. Making the waters of the mind clear, clean, still. And allow yourself to listen to the silence within. The silence of soul. And once again in your mind, emerge love. In the presence of the divine, however you define the divine. Emerge love, asking yourself the question, what is love for me? And how can I express it in my word? Let the question just sit there, not rushing towards any answer. And listen to the silence. Let the silence fill you from deep within. And holding on to the silence, allow yourself to gently return back to your present reality, opening your eyes and getting ready to engage with your world from a space of love. Today, that's the word. However you define it, your space of love, not your mama's place of love, not your papa's place of love, your space of love. How would you define it? What does it mean to you? And how can you bring it into your world?